7 months pregnant, marble floor, blood pooling beneath you.
Too easy.
You look up at your husband, and he's
You think
smiling.
this dress hides the
Drama
truth,
queen,
but everyone
he says.
knows.
You're fine.
He is
His
mine,
mistress stands over
and
you.
you will
The
stay
woman
away
who just
from
pushed
him.
you. The woman he's been sleeping with for 2 years. You're bleeding, cramping, begging. The baby, please. Someone help. And he
50
laughs,
million
that cold,
views.
cruel
He's
laugh
proud of what he did.
that's about to be
It's
heard
okay.
by 50
We have the
million
evidence
people.
now.
But here's what Preston
won't be
Green,
laughing for
tech
long.
billionaire, narcissist, sociopath way,
The defendant
didn't
is
know.
hereby
Your phone was
acquitted
still
on
on.
all
Your father
counts.
heard everything, and he was already on his way. 10 seconds later, the mansion doors didn't open. They exploded inward with a force that made the chandelier scream. A 6'2" retired Navy admiral stepped through, and Preston Green's smile froze. "You're done," Richard Hartwell said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." What happened next destroyed a billionaire empire, sent 2 people to prison, and turned a viral video into a weapon for justice. This is that story, and I promise you, you won't see the twists coming. Glass shattered against marble. The sound echoed through the foyer of the Green Mansion like a gunshot. Mallory Green felt the spray of champagne hit her bare arm. Cold, sticky. She looked down at her emerald silk gown. 7 months pregnant, and the dress had cost more than her old monthly rent. "Stop!" her voice cracked. "The baby! Please!" Preston's laugh cut through the air. Not nervous, not uncomfortable, genuinely amused. Mallory looked up at her husband. He stood 15 feet away, leaning against the marble column like he was watching a tennis match. His arms were crossed, his mouth curved into something that almost looked like a smile. "Oh, come on, Mallory." Preston's voice carried that particular tone she'd learned to recognize over the past 8 months, the one that made her doubt her own sanity. "Let Amber finish. This is getting good." Amber Sutton stood 3 feet in front of Mallory, 26 years old, perfect makeup, manicured nails painted blood red, Preston's executive assistant for the past 2 years, his mistress for just as long. "You trapped him!" Amber's voice pitched higher. "That baby is nothing but a trap." Mallory put both hands on her belly, protective. The baby kicked against her palm, strong. "Amber, please." Mallory tried to keep her voice steady. "This isn't what?" Amber took a step closer. "Isn't fair?" "You're right. It's not fair. I've been with Preston for 2 years. 2 years. And then you waltz in with your art gallery connections and your innocent act." "I didn't know." Mallory's throat felt tight. "I swear I didn't know about you." Preston laughed again. The sound made Mallory's stomach turn. She'd heard that laugh before. When she'd asked him why he missed her 20-week ultrasound. When she'd questioned the late nights at the office. When she'd suggested maybe he was spending too much time with Amber. "Hormonal," he'd said each time, laughing. "You're being dramatic, honey." 3 staff members stood frozen near the kitchen entrance. Maria, the housekeeper. James, the butler. Sophie, the cook. They all stared at the floor. Preston had trained them well. Never interfere, never question. Mallory's phone rang in her clutch. The purse lay on the side table near the door. She could see the screen lighting up. "Dad," her father was calling. "Drama queen, Mallory." Preston pushed off from the column. He walked closer. Not to help, just to get a better view. "You're fine. Stop being so dramatic." Amber's hands shot out. Mallory saw the manicured nails reaching for her face. She tried to step back. Her heel caught on the hem of her gown. The world tilted. No, 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 no. She hit the marble floor hard. Her hip took most of the impact. Pain shot through her side. Sharp, immediate, wrong, and then the cramping started. "Oh, God." Mallory curled onto her side, one hand on her belly, one hand on the floor. The marble felt cold beneath her palm. "The baby. Please. The baby." Wetness. She felt wetness between her legs. Warm. Too warm. Was it blood? Was she bleeding? "See?" Preston's voice came from somewhere above her. "Dramatic." Mallory looked up at her husband. He stood over her, still smiling, actually smiling. Behind him, Amber had stepped back. The woman's face had gone pale. Maybe she hadn't meant for this to happen. Maybe she just wanted to scare Mallory. Maybe. The cramping got worse. Mallory's vision blurred. She tried to focus, tried to breathe, tried to count. Don't cry. Don't give them the satisfaction. Breathe. Count to 10. Just breathe through it. 1, 2, 3, 4. The baby kicked, hard, angry, scared. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy's sorry. 5, 6, 7. Someone call her a car service. Preston waved his hand dismissively. And clean this up before the gala guests arrive. We have 200 people coming in an hour. Mallory's phone rang again, still on the side table, still lighting up. Dad. She tried to reach for it. Her arm wouldn't cooperate. Too heavy. Everything felt too heavy. 8, 9, 10. The phone kept ringing. Preston. Mallory's voice came out as a whisper. Please, I need help. The baby? You're fine. He checked his watch. Expensive. Swiss. Anniversary gift to himself last month. Stop being so dramatic. You just fell. Women fall all the time. Preston laughed again when Mallory's hand slipped on the marble. She tried to push herself up, failed. The emerald silk was soaked now. Blood. Definitely blood. This couldn't be happening. 8 months ago, Preston Green had walked into her art gallery during a charity event. He'd bought the entire exhibit. 12 pieces. $200,000. Just like that. Have dinner with me, he'd said. She'd said yes. 3 months later, they were married in Vegas. Elvis Chapel. She'd thought it was romantic, impulsive, the kind of story you told your grandchildren. When she told him about the pregnancy, his first words had been, "Are you sure you want to keep it?" She'd cried, he'd backpedaled, said he was just surprised, said he wanted to make sure she was ready, said all the right things. Looking back now, lying on the cold marble floor, Mallory could see every red flag she'd ignored. I told myself successful men work late, that I was hormonal, that love means understanding. God, I was so stupid. Her phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Dad wasn't giving up. Maria. Mallory tried to make eye contact with the housekeeper. Please, call 911. Maria looked at Preston. Preston shook his head. Maria stayed frozen. Preston. Amber's voice wavered. Maybe we should. Should what? Preston turned to his mistress. Call an ambulance for her theater performance? She's fine, Amber. This is what she does, creates drama. Makes everything about her. Mallory's hand found her clutch on the floor. It had fallen when she did. The contents spilled across the marble. Lipstick, compact mirror, her phone. She grabbed the phone. Her fingers felt numb, clumsy, but she managed to tap the screen. The call connected. Dad, her voice barely worked. Dad, Preston's laugh echoed through the foyer again. Closer this time. He was standing right over her now. Is that Rick? Tell your father you're fine, Mallory. Tell him you just had a little fall and you're being your usual dramatic. Let her finish, Mallory. Preston's voice carried clearly. Amused. Entertained. This is getting good. Mallory couldn't speak. The cramping was too intense. She could only curl tighter, phone pressed to her ear, praying her father could hear. Praying someone would help. Praying her baby would be okay. The phone slipped from her hand. It hit the marble. The screen cracked, but the call stayed connected. She could hear her father's voice. Distant. Urgent. Mallory, Mallory, what's happening? Where are you? Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. The chandelier above blurred into streaks of light. The cramping felt like her body was tearing itself apart. Always so dramatic, Preston said. Somewhere above her. Somewhere far away. Mallory whispered one word before the darkness took over. Dad. The front doors of the Green Mansion didn't open. They slammed. The sound reverberated through the foyer with such force that the chandelier crystals chimed, a clear high note that seemed to hang in the air. Preston's smile froze on his face. Richard Hartwell stood in the doorway. 6'2", silver hair cut military short, 68 years old but moved like a man 20 years younger. Navy admiral bearing in every line of his body. His eyes locked onto Preston Green with the kind of focus that had once commanded aircraft carriers. Behind him, Dorothy Hartwell entered. 56, elegant. Carrying an emergency medical bag, she'd come prepared. Rick, Preston's voice had lost its amused edge. This is a private family matter. You should. Richard said nothing. He walked across the foyer. His footsteps echoed. Military precision. Each one measured. Controlled. He stopped in front of Preston, removed his jacket, handed it to Dorothy without looking at her. Then he knelt beside his daughter. His hands went to her pulse. Steady, checking, professional. 20 years of Navy training kicked in automatically. You're done, Preston. Richard's voice was quiet, deadly. You just don't know it yet. Preston blinked. What are you talking about? I'm calling my lawyers. Call them. Richard didn't look up from Mallory. His fingers checked her pulse again, stronger than he'd feared. Good. You'll need them. Dorothy knelt on Mallory's other side. She opened the medical bag, pulled out gauze, checked the bleeding with professional efficiency. Mallory, honey. Dorothy's voice was soft, southern accent more pronounced when she was worried. Can you hear me, baby? Mallory's eyes fluttered. Mom? I'm here. We're both here. Dorothy looked at the 3 staff members, still frozen by the kitchen. Someone call 911, now. None of them moved. Anyone who doesn't move in 3 seconds is an accessory. Richard's voice cut through the foyer, still quiet, still deadly. 1, James pulled out his phone. 2, Maria was already dialing. 3, Sophie ran to open the front doors wider for the ambulance. Amber Sutton had backed up against the far wall. Her face was sheet white. Her red nails stood out like blood against her pale skin. She'd started to realize that something had shifted in the room. Power had changed hands. Preston straightened his shoulders, tried to reassert control. Rick, you're overreacting. She just fell. She's fine. She's always... I heard you. Richard finally looked up at Preston. The phone was on. I heard glass breaking. I heard her scream. I heard you laugh while my daughter begged you to stop. Richard stood, slowly, deliberately. He was 3 inches taller than Preston, 23 years older. But Preston took an involuntary step backward. I heard everything, Preston. The color drained from Preston's face. That's not... Preston's voice faltered. You don't understand. She was being dramatic. She always... You laughed. Richard's hands were at his sides, loose, ready. My daughter was bleeding on your floor, begging for help, and you laughed. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Dorothy had Mallory's head in her lap. She'd gotten a blanket from somewhere, covered Mallory's legs, preserved what dignity she could. Baby's moving. Dorothy's voice cracked slightly. Mallory, can you feel the baby? Mallory nodded, tears streaked down her face. Kicking, strong. That's good. That's so good, honey. Richard pulled out his phone, showed Preston the screen. I've suspected for 1 week, just one. Got the final investigator's report 2 hours ago. Preston's eyes widened. I was driving here to talk to you, man to man. Richard's thumb scrolled through photos on his phone. Give you one chance to end this affair quietly before Mallory got hurt. Photos of Preston and Amber. Restaurants, hotels, his office with the door locked. Timestamps, dates, everything documented. Then Mallory called. Richard pocketed his phone. I heard you, every word, every laugh. The sirens were louder now. Less than a minute away, Amber made a small sound, almost a whimper. Richard turned his gaze on her. Mr. Hartwell, I can explain. You put your hands on my pregnant daughter. Richard didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. You don't get to explain. Amber's mouth opened, closed. She had nothing to say. Preston tried again. Rick, listen. This is all a misunderstanding. Mallory and I, we've been having problems. The pregnancy has been hard on her. Emotionally, she gets upset easily, makes scenes. You know what I learned in the Navy? Richard took 1 step toward Preston. Just one. Preston stumbled backward. The difference between a man and a coward. A man protects the vulnerable. A coward hides behind them. Another step. You're no man, Preston. Another step. You're a coward in an expensive suit. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The ambulance pulled into the circular drive. Paramedics spilled out. 2 of them. A third person in scrubs running behind. Mallory! The third person pushed past everyone. I'm here, honey, I'm here. Nora Ashford, 31 years old, ER nurse, Mallory's best friend since college. She still wore her scrubs from her shift. Must have been nearby when Dorothy called. Nora. Mallory reached for her friend's hand. I've got you. Nora knelt beside Dorothy, took over medical assessment. Professional. Efficient. Her eyes scanned Mallory. Possible placental abruption. We need to move now. The paramedics brought the stretcher. Preston moved toward Mallory. I'm her husband. I should. Richard stepped into his path, blocked him completely. You lost that right when you laughed. Preston's face flushed red. You can't keep me from. Watch me. Richard and Dorothy flanked Mallory's stretcher as the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. Nora climbed in beside her. The doors started to close. Mallory's last view of the Green Mansion foyer was Preston standing alone. His expensive suit perfect. His face twisted with rage he could no longer express. And on the white marble floor, a dark stain. Blood. Her blood. Shattered glass catching the light. The doors closed. The siren wailed. The ambulance pulled away. Inside the ambulance, Mallory counted ceiling tiles. 23 of them. White. Dingy. One had a water stain in the corner. 23 tiles. 23 times I ignored my instincts. Count them. Focus. Stay conscious. 23 chances I had to leave. The paramedic's voice filtered through the counting. Blood pressure dropping. Let's move. The ambulance accelerated. The siren got louder. Nora held Mallory's hand. Look at me, honey. Stay with me. Mallory's eyes found Nora's face, focused, her best friend, the one person who had always told the truth. I knew. Mallory's voice came out barely above a whisper. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to believe it. Shh. Save your strength. No, Mallory needed to say it, needed someone to hear. I knew. His phone was always face down. He missed appointments. Worked late every week. With her. With Amber. The cramping eased slightly. Still there. Still wrong. But not as intense. I told myself successful men work late. The words tumbled out. Confession, relief. That I was hormonal. That love means understanding. Mallory, I was so stupid, Nora. You're not stupid. Nora squeezed her hand. You're human. You wanted to believe the best. That's not stupid. That's hopeful. The ambulance hit a bump. Everything jolted. The baby kicked in protest. He laughed. Mallory's eyes filled again. When I was on the floor, bleeding, begging for help, he laughed like it was funny. I know, honey. What kind of person does that? Nora's jaw clenched. The kind who's about to find out what happens when you hurt the people I love. The ambulance turned. The hospital must be close now. Mallory closed her eyes, tried to breathe, tried to believe this was really happening, that rescue had come, that her father had heard, that someone finally believed her. The taste in her mouth was bitter. Champagne. The glass Amber had thrown. Had that really been less than 15 minutes ago? It felt like a lifetime. The ambulance doors opened. Bright lights, voices, movement. 28 years old, 7 months pregnant, possible placental abruption from fall. The paramedics' words faded as they wheeled her through automatic doors. Everything became a blur of fluorescent lights and concerned faces. Somewhere behind her, she heard her father's voice. Strong, steady, real. I'm here, sweetheart. We're not leaving you. For the first time in 8 months, Mallory believed she might actually be safe. Richard Hartwell stood in the hospital corridor. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were tense. Dorothy approached. 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed him one. She's stable. Dorothy's voice was quiet. Baby's heartbeat is strong. They're monitoring for the next 48 hours, but Dr. Kincaid thinks they caught it in time. Richard nodded, took a sip of coffee. It was terrible. Hospital coffee always was. I should have acted sooner. His voice was flat, self-recrimination. Rick, 1 week. I had suspicions for 1 week. If I'd moved faster, you got there in time. Dorothy put her hand on his arm. You saved her. You saved them both. Barely. They stood in silence. Down the hall, nurses moved between rooms. A doctor consulted a chart. Normal hospital sounds. But nothing about tonight was normal. I heard him, Dorothy. Richard's hands tightened around the coffee cup. Through the phone, I heard glass breaking. I heard her scream. I heard him laugh. I know. He thought it was entertaining. Her pain, her fear. He was amused. Dorothy said nothing. Let him process. I've faced enemy combatants with more humanity than that man. Richard's voice went very quiet, very cold. I've seen war. I've seen cruelty. But what he did tonight to his own wife, his own child, he's going to pay for it. Damn right he is. Richard looked at his wife. I want him destroyed, Dorothy. Not just divorced, destroyed. Then that's what we'll do. They'd been married 32 years. Dorothy knew her husband, knew what that tone meant. Admiral Richard Hartwell was going to war, and Preston Green had no idea what was coming. Dr. Helen Kincaid looked up from her tablet, 45 years old, 20 years as an OBGYN. She'd seen a lot, but the young woman in the hospital update made her chest tighten. Baby is okay for now. Dr. Kincaid sat on the edge of the bed. But Mother is severely traumatized. This wasn't just physical. Mallory lay propped up on pillows. Her emerald gown was gone, replaced by a hospital gown. Her hair was still perfect from the gala preparations. Makeup still flawless. The contrast was jarring. What about preterm labor? Richard stood at the foot of the bed. We've stopped it for now. Dr. Kincaid looked at Mallory. But you need to stay calm. No stress. Complete bed rest for at least 48 hours while we monitor. Mallory almost laughed. No stress. Right. Can I see the baby? Her hand rested on her belly. On the ultrasound? Of course. Dr. Kincaid set up the portable machine. The familiar whir and beep filled the room. She squirted gel on Mallory's belly, moved the wand. The heartbeat filled the room. Strong, fast, perfect. There she is. Dr. Kincaid smiled. Fighting, just like Mama. Mallory's eyes filled. She? You didn't know? Preston wanted it to be a surprise. Mallory's voice caught. He said it would be more exciting for social media if we found out together at the birth. Dr. Kincaid and Dorothy exchanged glances. Well, Dr. Kincaid kept her voice professional. You're having a daughter, very healthy, very strong, measuring right on track. A daughter. Mallory watched the grainy image on the screen. Tiny profile. Button nose, perfect. I'm going to protect you, she whispered. I promise. No matter what. An hour later, Richard paced outside Mallory's room. Dorothy sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs. Nora leaned against the wall. He tried to get in. Nora's voice was tight with anger. 10 minutes ago, security had to escort him out. How? Richard stopped pacing. I called ahead. Nora pulled out her phone. Hospital administrator is a friend. Told him we needed a temporary protective order. He expedited it. Judge signed based on your phone recording. Richard nodded. Good. Preston was screaming. Nora's mouth twisted. Said he's her husband. Said we can't keep him out. Said he'll sue the hospital. Let him try. His mother showed up too. Dorothy groaned. Evelyn? She's in the waiting room, playing the victim, crying about how this is all a misunderstanding. Nora's eyes flashed. I may have accidentally spilled my very hot coffee near her designer shoes. Accidentally? Dorothy's lips twitched. Very accidentally. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed. What is it? Dorothy stood. Grant Mitchell, Preston's business partner. Richard showed them the text. Says he needs to talk to me. Says it's urgent. Says he has evidence. Evidence of what? He doesn't say, just asks if he can come to the hospital. Now, Richard replied, then looked at Nora. Will the hospital let him in? If you vouch for him, yes. Then tell him to come. Evelyn Green sat in the waiting room. Her Chanel suit was immaculate, her makeup perfect. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her phone. She'd seen the text from Preston, seen his rage, his confusion, his demand that she fix this. But Evelyn had also seen something else. The video. One of the staff members, she didn't know which, had sent her security footage from the mansion. Just 3 minutes of video. But those 3 minutes changed everything. She'd watched it twice now. Each time made her feel sicker. Preston laughing, arms crossed. Mallory bleeding on the floor. Amber's attack, her son's cruelty. Evelyn closed her eyes. 35 years. She'd spent 35 years raising Preston, giving him everything, excusing everything. Boys will be boys, she'd said when he got in trouble at school. He's just ambitious, she'd said when his business methods were questioned. Marriage is complicated, she'd said when Mallory first expressed concerns. She'd always defended him, always made excuses. But she couldn't excuse this. Mrs. Green? Evelyn looked up. Dorothy Hartwell stood in front of her. Not warm, not welcoming, just present. I'd like to see Mallory. Evelyn's voice sounded small. Please, she's carrying my grandchild. I just want to make sure she's okay. She's okay, no thanks to your son. Dorothy, surely this is all a misunderstanding. Preston would never. Your son laughed while my daughter bled. Dorothy's southern accent sharpened like a blade. There's security footage, I've seen it. So have you, I suspect, based on that phone in your hand. Evelyn's fingers tightened on her phone. There's no misunderstanding, Evelyn. There's just truth, and the truth is your son is cruel. He endangered his wife and unborn child. He found it entertaining. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice, multiple choices, over months. Dorothy's voice softened slightly, not with warmth, with pity. I'm sorry for what's coming, Evelyn. I truly am. But you need to leave. Now, Mallory doesn't need your excuses. She needs to heal. But the baby is not your concern right now. Leave, or I'll have security remove you. Evelyn stood, gathered her purse, walked toward the elevator with as much dignity as she could manage. In the reflection of the elevator doors, she looked old, tired, defeated. When had she become the woman who made excuses for cruelty? The elevator doors closed. Mallory woke in darkness. The hospital room was quiet. Only the beep of monitors, the soft whoosh of the ventilation system. Red numbers on the clock said 3:30 in the morning. She was alone. The baby kicked. A reminder. Still here, still fighting. I'm sorry, Mallory whispered to her belly. I'm so sorry, baby girl. More kicks, stronger this time. Mallory's mind drifted through memories, each one now tainted, poisoned. What she'd thought was love story now looked like horror show when viewed through truth. Their wedding. She'd thought the Elvis Chapel was romantic, spontaneous. Looking back, she realized Preston had pushed for Vegas specifically. No family, no friends, no witnesses to object, no one to ask questions. The pregnancy announcement. She'd been so excited, 6 weeks along. Bought a tiny pair of shoes to surprise him. Are you sure you want to keep it? His first words, his first instinct, get rid of the problem. She'd cried, he'd backpedaled, said all the right things, but those first words had been honest. Everything after was performance. Their first date, the gallery event. He'd bought 12 pieces, $200,000. She'd been so flattered, so impressed. Now she wondered, had that been strategy too? Flash money, make her feel special, make her dependent. The first time he'd called her dramatic, 3 months into the marriage. She'd asked why he missed her ultrasound. He'd laughed, called her hormonal, said she was being dramatic. She'd apologized. God, she'd apologized to him. The pattern emerged so clearly now. Preston would hurt her. She'd react. He'd laugh and call her dramatic. She'd doubt herself, apologize, promise to be less sensitive. He'd trained her like a dio, and she'd let him. I wasn't crazy, Mallory whispered to the darkness, to herself, to her daughter. The signs weren't subtle. They were everywhere. I was just so desperate to believe the lie. Her phone sat on the bedside table, charged, waiting. She picked it up, scrolled through contacts. She had 200 contacts saved. How many had she talked to in the past 6 months? None. Preston had slowly, methodically cut her off from everyone. Friends from college, family friends, even her own mother, before Dorothy had finally put her foot down. They don't understand our relationship, he'd said. They're jealous of what we have, he'd said. Do you really need them when you have me? He'd said. And she'd believed him, pulled away, made herself smaller, more manageable, more alone. The hospital door opened slightly. A nurse peeked in. You're awake. Do you need anything? No, thank you. I'm okay. The nurse checked her monitors, made notes on the chart, left. Mallory wasn't okay, but saying the words out loud felt like too much effort. She closed her eyes, tried to sleep, but every time she drifted off, she heard it. Preston's laugh, cold, amused, genuinely entertained by her pain. That sound would haunt her forever. Mallory woke to voices in the hallway, quiet, urgent. She blinked at the clock. 7 in the morning. She'd slept maybe 3 hours total. Her father entered carrying coffee in what looked like a laptop bag. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. Mallory tried to sit up, winced. Everything hurt. Don't move too fast. Richard set the coffee down, helped her adjust the pillows. Grant Mitchell is here, Preston's business partner. Says he has something you need to see. Grant? Mallory's brain felt fuzzy. I've met him maybe twice. Why would he? He's been recording conversations. Says he knew something was wrong. A man appeared in the doorway. 39, brown hair starting to gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a laptop like it was made of glass. Mallory, Grant's voice was gentle. I'm so sorry for everything. I should have spoken up sooner. Come in, Richard said. Close the door. Grant entered, sat in the chair next to the bed, opened his laptop with shaking hands. I've been recording Preston for 3 weeks. Grant kept his eyes on the screen, like he couldn't bear to look at her. I knew something was off. The way he talked about you, the way he treated you at company events. I started documenting. You recorded him? Mallory's voice came out sharper than intended. I'm sorry, I know it's invasive, but I needed evidence before I could act, before anyone would believe me. Grant finally met her eyes. What I found was worse than I imagined. He turned the laptop toward her, hit play on an audio file. Preston's voice filled the room. Marrying Mallory was strategic, family man image before the IPE. Another voice, male, older. And the pregnancy? Perfect timing, the baby seals it. Investors love dynasty narratives. Multi-generational wealth, legacy, all that bullshit. What about after the IPO? Once the kid's born, we phase her out slowly. Postpartum depression angle. She'll be unstable, unreliable. No one questions a divorce then. Mallory's hands went numb. The coffee cup nearly slipped from her fingers. There's more, Grant said quietly. He played another file, Amber's voice this time. What if she fights the divorce? Preston laughed, that same cold laugh from last night. She won't. I've made her doubt her own sanity for months. She'll think it's her fault. She'll go quietly. And if she doesn't, then we make it messier. Affair allegations. Maybe she's unstable. Maybe she's a danger to the baby. We have options. The recording stopped. Mallory couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process. That's from 3 days ago. Grant closed the laptop. He's been planning this for months, Mallory. Maybe longer. The marriage, the baby, all of it was calculated. Richard's jaw clenched. His hands formed fists. Dorothy entered the room. She'd been listening from the doorway. Her face was pale. There's more. Grant pulled out a folder. Physical documents. Financial crimes, offshore accounts, embezzled funds, stock manipulation. Preston's been stealing from the company for 2 years. How much? Richard asked. $37 million so far. The number hung in the air. Impossible. Surreal. Amber helped him hide it. Grant spread documents across the bed. Bank statements, wire transfers, dates, and amounts. She's been moving money, creating shell companies, falsifying records. Mallory stared at the papers. The numbers blurred together. Wasihi. Her voice came out as a whisper. Why would she help him steal from his own company? Because he promised her a cut and something else. Grant pulled up another recording. You need to hear this. It's from yesterday morning. Preston's voice again. Different tone this time, confident, cruel. Amber is useful now, but she's a liability long-term. A lawyer's voice, professional, detached. You're saying she acted alone in the embezzlement? I'm saying when investigators dig, they'll find her signature on everything. I made sure of that. And the affair? Preston's laugh again. Harassment. She pursued me. I have emails to prove it. Dated back 2 years, time-stamped. Very convincing. So she takes the fall? She's an executive assistant sleeping with her married boss and stealing millions. Who's going to believe her over me? I'll be the victim. My wife will be the victim. Amber will be the villain in our love story. The recording ended. Mallory looked at Grant. He was going to destroy her too. Both of you, he had exit strategies for both of you. Grant's hand shook as he closed the laptop. I've been working with Preston for 6 years. I thought I knew him. But listening to these recordings, I don't know him at all. Why are you showing me this? Mallory's voice hardened. Why help me now? You knew for 3 weeks. Because I was a coward. Grant met her eyes, didn't flinch. I told myself I needed more evidence, that I had to be her. But the truth, I was scared. Preston signs my paychecks. He controls the company. I have a mortgage, car payments. I was more worried about my own comfort than your safety. Silence filled the room. I chose wrong. Grant's voice cracked. I'm choosing right now. Better late than never, right? Better late than never, Mallory repeated. The words felt hollow. But what choice did she have? Grant had evidence she needed. What do we do with this? Richard asked. Everything. Mallory's hand stopped shaking. Her voice went cold. Something shifted inside her, from victim to strategist. I want every recording, every document, everything. She looked at her father. They wanted to break me. Let's show them what broken really looks like. Brooks Callahan arrived at noon, 42 years old, 3 decades practicing family law, reputation for being absolutely ruthless in divorce court. He'd been Richard's lawyer years ago when Richard's sister had gone through a messy divorce. Brooks had destroyed the ex-husband so thoroughly the man had moved to another state. Mallory. Brooks shook her hand, firm grip, all business. I've reviewed the evidence Grant provided. This is good, very good, but I need to know something before we proceed. What? What do you want from Preston? Money? Custody? Revenge? All 3? Mallory didn't hesitate. I don't want his money. Money can be rebuilt. I want his empire destroyed. I want everyone to know what he is. Brooks smiled, actually smiled. Good. Money cases are boring. This is going to be fun. He pulled out a tablet, started making notes. Here's the strategy. We hit him from 3 directions simultaneously. Criminal charges for the assault and financial crimes, civil suit for emotional distress, and divorce with full custody and asset protection. Will it work? Dorothy asked. It'll devastate him. The criminal charges alone could mean 15 years. Add the financial crimes? The IRS is already investigating offshore accounts, thanks to Grant's tip. The SEC is looking at stock manipulation. Brooks swiped through more notes. But here's the beautiful part. The video. What video? Mallory asked. Mansion security footage. Shows everything from last night. Amber attacking you, Preston laughing, you bleeding, all of it. Mallory's stomach turned. How did you... Grant. Brooks nodded toward the other man. He accessed the security system this morning, downloaded everything before Preston could delete it. Grant spoke up. I'm also reaching out to Amber, showing her the recordings of Preston's plans to betray her, giving her a choice. Turn state's evidence against Preston or go down with him. Will she take it? Richard asked. She's not stupid. Self-preservation will win. Grant's mouth twisted. She'll testify against him to save herself. Mallory listened to them plan, strategize, plot Preston's destruction. She should feel something. Guilt maybe, sadness, something. But all she felt was cold certainty. He'd tried to break her, make her doubt her own reality, isolate her, control her, use her baby as a prop. Now he was going to learn what happened when you underestimated the woman you called dramatic. One more thing. Brooks looked at Mallory seriously. This is going to get ugly. Public. Preston will fight back. Make accusations. Try to smear you. Are you prepared for that? Mallory put both hands on her belly, felt her daughter kick. Strong, alive, real. Let him try. The video leaked 2 days later. Nobody could prove who posted it. The account was anonymous. The upload happened at 3 in the morning from an IP address that bounced through 7 countries. But within 6 hours, 10 million people had watched Preston Green laugh while his pregnant wife bled. By morning, the number hit 50 million. Mallory watched it go viral from her hospital bed. Her phone buzzed constantly. Notifications, messages, friend requests from strangers, media outlets asking for interviews. Nora sat next to her, scrolling through social media on her own phone. The comments, Nora's voice was tight. Mallory, you need to see these. Wow. She turned her phone toward Mallory, at Justice Seeker. He's entertained by her pain. Look at his face. He's actually enjoying this. Tad, Mom. Off the girls. I'm 7 months pregnant too. Watching this made me physically ill. How could he? Ash, RC survivor. This is abuse. This is what abuse looks like. Thank you for sharing. Survivors see you. At Tech Insider. Preston Green's company just lost 3 major contracts. Sponsors dropping like flies. The hashtag #he laughed was trending worldwide. And Mallory scrolled through her own phone, found Preston's company Twitter. The official account hadn't posted in 12 hours. The replies were brutal. You employ a man who laughed while his pregnant wife bled? Boycott Green Tech. How does the board feel about this? Her phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Mrs. Green, this is Amanda Collins from the Washington Post. I'd like to interview you about... Mallory hung up. 3 more calls came in the next 10 minutes. CNN, NBC, Forbes. She turned her phone to silent. This is insane. Dorothy stood at the window. There are reporters downstairs. Hospital security is keeping them out. But they're everywhere. Richard entered holding his own phone. His face was grim. Preston was arrested 20 minutes ago. At his office, public perp walk. Cameras everywhere. He pulled up a news site. Showed them the photo. Preston in handcuffs. Expensive suit wrinkled. Hair messed. Face twisted with rage. The headline read, Tech billionaire arrested after viral video shows him laughing at pregnant wife's assault. Good, Mallory said quietly. The door opened. Dr. Kincaid entered with a smile. Baby's heartbeat is perfect. You've avoided preterm labor. I'm comfortable discharging you today with strict instructions. What kind of instructions? Bed rest at home. No stress. Dr. Kincaid's smile turned wry. Though I imagine that's going to be difficult given the circumstances. We have a safe house arranged. Richard pulled out papers. Gated community, 24-hour security, fully stocked, far from the Green Mansion. That's why I'm... Dr. Kincaid signed the discharge papers. Come back if you have any cramping, bleeding, or decreased fetal movement. Otherwise, I'll see you for your next appointment in 1 week. The safe house was beautiful. 2-story, 4-bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a lake. Richard had rented it that morning using a shell company. No connection to the Hartwell name. Completely private. Nora helped Mallory up the stairs to the master bedroom. The room was already set up. Fresh linens, flowers on the nightstand, a rocking chair in the corner. Your mom went shopping. Nora gestured to the closet. Clothes in your size, maternity stuff, everything you need. Mallory sat on the bed. Real furniture, real life, not a hospital room. I can't go back there, she said quietly, to the mansion, even to get my things. You don't have to. Nora sat beside her. We already sent movers. Got all your personal items, your clothes, your art supplies, photos, everything. It's in storage until you're ready. What about... Mallory stopped. What about what? Her wedding ring? The nursery Preston had approved? The life she'd built in that house? All of it felt contaminated now. We got Charlotte's baby clothes, Nora said softly. The books you bought, the blankets, the good stuff. Left everything with his credit card on it. Charlotte, Mallory smiled slightly. I'm naming her Charlotte. Charlotte Grace Hartwell. Hartwell? I'm taking back my maiden name. She's mine. Not his. Mine. Nora hugged her, fierce, protective. That's perfect. Mallory's phone buzzes. She'd turned it back on for necessary calls only. This was from Grant. Grant. Amber agreed. She's turning state's evidence, testifying against Preston. Prosecutor says with her cooperation plus the recordings, they have enough for embezzlement, fraud, and assault charges. Mallory. How long? Grant. 7 to 10 years minimum. More if they add charges. Mallory set the phone down. 7 to 10 years. Charlotte would be 9 when Preston got out. 9 years old. Old enough to understand. Old enough to ask questions. What will I tell her? Mallory looked at Nora. When she asked about her father? The truth? Nora's voice was firm. Age-appropriate truth. That he made very bad choices. That he hurt people. That he's paying for those choices. And that none of it is her fault. She'll see the video eventually. Everyone's seen it. Then you'll be there to explain it. To give context. To show her that you survived. That you're strong. Nora squeezed her hand. She'll be proud of you, Mallory. I promise. That night, Mallory sat in the master bedroom. Everyone else had gone to bed. The lake outside reflected moonlight. Peaceful. Quiet. Her laptop sat open. Against her better judgment, she searched her own name. 200 million results. Articles, think pieces, hot takes, op-eds about domestic violence, about abuse, about the power dynamics of wealth. One article caught her eye, from a domestic violence survivor's blog. I watched the video of Mallory Green. I saw her on that floor. I heard her beg. I heard him laugh. And I recognized every moment, because I've been there, different details. Same pattern. He made her small, made her doubt, made her think she was crazy. The laugh isn't about humor. It's about power, about control, about knowing he could hurt her and she had no recourse. Thank you, Mallory Green, for showing us we're not alone, for showing us what abuse really looks like, for surviving. Mallory closed the laptop, wiped her eyes, put both hands on her belly. Your mama's going to be okay, Charlotte. I promise. We both are. The baby kicked in response. Strong, alive, real. They were going to make it. 3:30 in the morning. Mallory sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair she'd dragged from the corner to face the window. She couldn't lie in bed, couldn't get comfortable. Every position hurt. Every breath felt too shallow. The baby kicked against her hands. Regular rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're still there. We're both still here. 5, 6, 7. Keep kicking. Show me you're okay. 8, 9, 10. Her chest felt tight, not from pain, from something else. Something breaking open inside her. I chose this. The thought hit her like a fist. I married a stranger in Vegas after 3 months. I ignored every red flag because I wanted the fairy tale. I put my baby in danger because I was desperate to be loved. The tears came. Hot, angry, overwhelming. What kind of mother does that? She thought about the ultrasound, her daughter's profile. Perfect button nose, tiny hands. He laughed. God, he actually laughed. I heard it. That sound, genuine amusement at my pain. Mallory cried so hard she couldn't breathe. Her whole body shook. Nurses had checked on her twice. She'd waved them away. She needed this, needed to fall apart, needed to stop being strong for 5 minutes. I'm not crying because I lost him. The realization hit through the tears. I'm crying because I never had him. Everything was fake, every kind word, every gesture, every moment I thought was love, performance, strategy, calculation. She'd married a man who saw her as a prop, the baby as a business asset, their entire relationship as a PR campaign. And she'd believed it, wanted so desperately to be loved that she'd ignored every warning sign. The door opened quietly. Dorothy entered. 4 in the morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee, real coffee, not hospital sludge. Couldn't sleep. Dorothy sat in the other chair. Can't stop thinking. Mallory wiped her eyes. About all the times I made excuses for him, all the times I thought I was overreacting. That's what he wanted you to think. I know. Intellectually, I know, but Mallory's voice cracked. What if I can't do this? Single mother? Divorce? Scandal? Everyone's seen that video. Everyone knows. Knows what? That I was stupid enough to marry him. Stop. Dorothy's voice sharpened. You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. Those are different things. Are they? Yes. Dorothy set down her coffee, turned to face Mallory fully. I need to tell you something. About 32 years ago. Mallory looked at her mother. I almost married the wrong man. Before your father. His name was William. He was charming, successful, made me feel special. Mom, I didn't know. He started small. Comments about my friends, suggestions about my clothes, made me doubt my own judgment. Dorothy's voice stayed steady. I thought he was helping me improve, become better, more sophisticated. What happened? Your father happened. We were friends then, just friends. He saw what was happening, saw how William isolated me, made me smaller. Dorothy took a sip of coffee. Rick didn't tell me to leave William, didn't give me orders. He gave me a mirror. A mirror? Showed me who I was becoming if I stayed. Quiet, uncertain, always apologizing, checking my words, walking on eggshells. Dorothy met Mallory's eyes. I looked in that mirror and didn't recognize myself. So you left him. I left him. It was terrifying. Everyone said I was making a mistake. William was successful, stable, safe. What more could I want? What did you tell them? That I wanted to like myself again. That I wanted to stop being afraid in my own relationship. That safe wasn't the same as good. Dorothy reached for Mallory's hand. I'm your mirror now, baby. Look. I don't. You're already standing. You fell, but you got up. You called for help. You're protecting your daughter. You're fighting back. You're doing it. Mallory looked down at their joined hands. What if I can't? You're already doing it right now, this moment. You're doing it. They sat in silence. Outside, the sun started to rise. Pink and orange streaked across the sky. Strength isn't not falling, Dorothy said quietly. It's getting back up. And sweetheart, you're already standing. Something shifted in Mallory's chest. The tight feeling eased, just slightly, but enough. Tell me it gets better, Mallory whispered. It gets better, I promise. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but eventually you wake up and realize you haven't thought about him in hours, then days, then weeks. And one day you realize you're happy, actually happy, not performing, not pretending, just genuinely content with your life. How long did it take you? 6 months to stop being angry, a year to stop being scared, 2 years to genuinely forgive myself for not leaving sooner. Dorothy squeezed her hand. Everyone's timeline is different, but you will get there. Mallory nodded, wiped her eyes again. Can you do something for me? She looked at her mother. Anything. Braid my hair, like you used to when I was little. Dorothy's eyes filled. Of course, baby. She moved behind Mallory, gentle fingers sectioning hair, the familiar rhythm, over and under, weaving. Mallory closed her eyes. Let herself be 6 years old again. Safe, loved, protected. By the time Dorothy tied off the braid, the sun had fully risen, and Mallory felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Dr. Kincaid reviewed the chart. Heartbeat strong, movement good. You've completely avoided preterm labor. I'm comfortable discharging you today. Mallory nodded from the hospital bed. 3 days since the attack. Felt like 3 years. Bed rest? She asked. Modified. You can move around the house. No heavy lifting. No stress. Dr. Kincaid's mouth quirked. Though I imagine that last part is impossible. Slightly. I mean it, Mallory. Your body has been through trauma, physical and emotional. You need to rest. For yourself and for Charlotte. The name still sent warmth through her chest. Charlotte, her daughter, her choice. I'll rest. Good. Dr. Kincaid signed papers. Any questions before discharge? What happens if he shows up? At my home? He won't. The restraining order is ironclad. If he comes within 500 feet of you, he's arrested immediately. Dr. Kincaid met her eyes. You're protected, Mallory, legally. physically. We've made sure of it. Richard had chosen the safe house well, gated community, 24-hour security. The guard at the entrance had Preston's photo, Amber's photo, Evelyn's photo. None of them could get within a mile of Mallory. Nora helped her up the stairs. Your room is ready. Your mom went a little crazy with the nesting. Mallory entered the master bedroom, stopped, fresh flowers on every surface, her favorite lavender scent, the rocking chair from her childhood in the corner, photos of her family on the nightstand. The nursery across the hall was already set up, crib assembled, dresser stocked with tiny clothes, bookshelves full of children's books. Mom did all this, and your dad and me, we wanted you to feel safe. Nora gestured around. This is your space. He's never been here. Never touched anything. It's all yours. Mallory sat on the bed. Real sheets. Real life. Grant is coming by in an hour, Nora said. Says he needs your permission for something. What? Wouldn't say, just said it was important. Grant arrived with his laptop and folders of documents. He looked worse than last time. Dark circles, wrinkled shirt, hadn't shaved. You look terrible, Mallory said. I've been working with prosecutors, giving depositions, turning over evidence. Grant sat heavily in the armchair. Preston's lawyers are trying to suppress the recordings, claiming they're illegally obtained. Are they? Murky legal area. I recorded him in his office. Technically legal in our state, but his lawyers are fighting it anyway. Will it work? No, we have too much physical evidence. Bank records, wire transfers, Amber's testimony. The recordings are just icing. Grant rubbed his face. But there's something else. He opened his laptop, pulled up a video file. Amber called me yesterday. She's terrified. Preston's people have been contacting her, threatening her. She recorded one of the calls. Grant hit play. A male voice. Not Preston. Someone else. You think turning state's evidence will save you? You're nobody. A secretary sleeping with her boss. Who's going to believe you? Amber's voice, shaking. I have evidence. Evidence that disappears. Witnesses that change their minds. Accidents happen, Amber, especially to people who betray Preston Green. The call ended. Mallory felt cold. That's a death threat. Yes, I reported it to the FBI this morning. They're taking it seriously. Grant closed the laptop, but Amber is scared, rightfully. Preston has resources, connections, money. What does she want? Protection. She'll testify. She's committed to that, but she wants to make sure she survives long enough to do it. Can we help her? Grant looked surprised. You want to help her? After what she did to you? Mallory thought about it. Amber had attacked her, helped Preston plan her misery, conspired to destroy her. But Amber was also a victim. Different kind, different level. But Preston had used her too. Made promises, set her up to take the fall. He was going to destroy her, Mallory said quietly. Same way he destroyed me. Different method, same goal. So I'm not going to let him. Help her, get her into witness protection if you need to. Pay for security, whatever it takes. Grant nodded slowly. You're a better person than most. No, I'm just tired of him winning. Brooks Callahan called that afternoon. Preliminary hearing is set for next week. Criminal charges, assault, embezzlement, fraud, stock manipulation. Judge will determine if there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. There is, Mallory said. Agreed, but we need you there. In the courtroom, visible, pregnant, sympathetic. I'm not a prop. No, you're a survivor. And the judge needs to see that, needs to see who Preston hurt. Brooks' voice gentled. I know it's asking a lot, to face him, but your presence matters. Mallory looked out the window. Lake glimmering in afternoon sun, peaceful, safe. She could stay here. Let others fight her battles. Hide until after Charlotte was born. Or she could show up. Look Preston in the eye, show him and everyone else that she wasn't broken. I'll be there, she said. Good. Wear something simple. No expensive clothes. Nothing he bought you. We want you to look like myself. Exactly. Evelyn Green sat alone in her apartment, not the family home. She'd sold that last week. Couldn't bear to stay in the same neighborhood where everyone had seen the video, where former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Her phone hadn't rung in 3 days. 30 years of social standing, country club membership, charity boards, all of it had gone. She tried defending Preston, released a statement through his lawyers. My son is a good man. This is a misunderstanding. We asked for privacy during this difficult time. The response had been brutal. Your son laughed while his pregnant wife bled. This is what enabling looks like. You raised a monster. Her own sisters had called, asked her to stop making statements, said she was embarrassing the family, said maybe Preston had problems she'd refused to see. Evelyn looked at her phone, at the video she'd watched dozens of times now. Preston laughing, arms crossed, entertained, Mallory bleeding, begging, terrified. When had her son become this person? Or had he always been this person and she just refused to see it? Boys will be bosses, she'd said when he'd bullied classmates. He's just competitive, she'd said when he'd cheated in business. Marriage is complicated, she'd said when Mallory had first expressed concerns. Always excuses, always defenses, never consequences. She'd enabled this, created this, taught him that wealth and status meant he could do what he wanted without repercussions. And now a young woman and her unborn child had paid the price. Evelyn picked up her phone, dialed her lawyer. I want to set up a trust fund for Charlotte Green, or Hartwell, whatever Mallory names her. Mrs. Green, I'm not sure that's $5 million, anonymous. She can access it when she turns 18, for college, for life, for whatever she needs. Your son's lawyers won't like that. I don't care what they like. Do it. She hung up. It wouldn't fix anything. Wouldn't erase the video. Wouldn't undo the damage. But it was something. It was a start. The courthouse steps were lined with reporters. Mallory sat in Richard's car. Couldn't see them yet, but she could hear the noise. Shouting. Questions. Cameras clicking. We can go through the back entrance, Richard offered. No. Mallory's hand rested on her belly. 8 months now. Charlotte was due in 4 weeks. I'm not hiding. Dorothy reached back from the front seat, squeezed Mallory's hand. You don't have to do this, honey. Yes, I do. She wore a simple blue dress, cotton, nothing expensive, nothing Preston had bought. Her hair was pulled back, minimal makeup, Nora's work. You look beautiful, Nora said from beside her, and strong, and exactly like yourself. Brooks had arrived earlier, sent a text. I'm in courtroom B, security's ready. When you're ready, we'll walk you through. Richard got out first, came around, opened Mallory's door. The noise hit her like a wall. Mallory, how are you feeling? Will you testify? What do you want to say to Preston? How far along are you? Richard's hand at her back, steady, Dorothy on her other side, Nora behind her, a protective circle. They walked up the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, strangers staring. Mallory kept her eyes forward, didn't smile, didn't cry, just walked. The courthouse doors closed behind them. Blessed silence. You okay? Nora asked. Mallory nodded, heart racing, hands shaking. But okay. Brooks met them in the hallway. Courtroom is full. Media, victims advocates, survivors groups. This is going to be huge. Where's Preston? Separate entrance. He's already inside with his lawyers. Evelyn is here too. His mother? She requested to be present. Judge allowed it. But Mallory, Brooks looked serious. She's not sitting with the Preston. She's in the victims section. That stopped Mallory. What? She called my office yesterday, asked to sit with you. I told her absolutely not, but she insisted on coming, said she needs to be here, needs to see it. They entered the courtroom. It was everything Brooks had described. Packed, every seat filled, sketch artists in the back. The judge's bench empty but waiting. And there, 3 rows behind the prosecutor's table, sat Evelyn Green. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no makeup, her hair gray. She looked old. Evelyn met Mallory's eyes, nodded once, didn't smile, just acknowledged. Mallory looked away, sat in the front row with Brooks, her family behind her. The bailiff called out, "All rise, the Honorable Judge Margaret Collins presiding." Everyone stood. Judge Collins entered, 60 years old, silver hair, no-nonsense expression. She'd reviewed the evidence. Mallory knew. Brooks had filed everything. "Be seated." The bailiff brought Preston in. Mallory's breath caught. He looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, hair disheveled, 3 days of stubble, dark circles. Nothing like the polished billionaire who'd laughed in his mansion foyer. Yeah. Preston's eyes found hers, cold, angry, blaming. Mallory looked back, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Judge Collins reviewed papers. "We're here for a preliminary hearing in the matter of the state versus Preston Green. Multiple charges. Let's begin with assault." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence, including video footage from the night in question." "Proceed." The courtroom lights dimmed, a screen lowered, the video played. Mallory had seen it online. But seeing it here, in this context, with Preston 15 feet away, her own voice. "Stop, the baby, please." Preston's laugh, cold, amused. The entire courtroom heard it. Every detail, every word. "Let her finish, Mallory. This is getting good." People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, disturbed. Mallory hitting the floor, blood spreading beneath emerald silk. Preston's final insult. Drama queen, always so dramatic. The video ended. Silence. Judge Collins looked at Preston. "Mr. Green, is that your laugh we hear on the recording?" Preston's lawyer started to speak. "Your Honor, I'm asking Mr. Green." Preston stood. "Your Honor, she was being dramatic. I didn't think—" "You didn't think." Judge Collins's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I've seen many things in my courtroom, but a man laughing while his pregnant wife bleeds? That's a first. And last, if I have anything to say about it." Preston's face flushed red. "Your Honor, my client—" "Save it. We have more evidence to review." Judge Collins nodded to the prosecutor. "Continue." The prosecutor called Grant Mitchell. Grant took the stand, sworn in, looked directly at Preston. "Mr. Mitchell, you're Preston Green's business partner, correct?" "I was. I've resigned." "Tell the court why." Grant pulled out his tablet. "I've been recording Preston's conversations for 3 weeks. I knew something was wrong, the way he talked about his wife, about their unborn child, about his employees." "Objection!" Preston's lawyer stood. "These recordings are illegally obtained." "Overruled. This is a preliminary hearing. I'll determine what's admissible." "Continue, Mr. Mitchell." All right, Grant played the recordings. Preston's voice filled the courtroom. "Marrying Mallory was strategic. The baby seals it. Investors love dynasty narratives. We phase her out slowly, postpartum depression angle. Each quote landed like a physical blow. Mallory watched the jury's faces, saw disgust, anger, shock. "Mr. Mitchell, why did you record these conversations?" "Because I was a coward." Grant's voice cracked. "I knew something was wrong. I saw the pattern, the isolation, the cruelty. But I didn't act." "Why not?" "Because Preston signs my paychecks, because I have bills, because I was more worried about my own comfort than Mrs. Green's safety." Grant looked at Mallory. "I told myself I was protecting Gwimp. Thousands of families depend on Preston's company. But one family, Mallory and her baby, they depended on someone speaking up. I chose wrong. And now I'm choosing right. Better late than never." The prosecutor nodded. Baron, no further questions. Preston's lawyer stood for cross-examination. But Judge Collins held up her hand. "Save it for trial. I've heard enough." She looked at Preston. "These recordings, combined with the video evidence and medical reports, show clear cause for trial. Criminal charges will proceed: assault, embezzlement, fraud, stock manipulation." "Your Honor," Preston's lawyer tried again. "I'm not finished. The protective order remains in place. Mr. Green is to have no contact with Mrs. Green or her immediate family. Bail is revoked pending trial. You're remanded to custody." Preston exploded. You can't do this. I'm not a criminal. She's lying. This whole thing is a setup. Bailiff, remove Mr. Green. It took 3 bailiffs. Preston screamed the entire way out. Threats, accusations, rage. I'll destroy you, Mallory. You'll never see a penny. That baby is mine, mine. The courtroom door slammed behind him. Silence again. Judge Collins looked at Mallory. Her expression softened, slightly. Mrs. Green, I want you to know something. This court sees you. We believe you, and we will make sure justice is served. Mallory nodded. Couldn't speak. Throat too tight. Preliminary hearing adjourned. Trial date will be set within 30 days. The gavel struck. Everyone stood. Mallory walked out of the courtroom on shaking legs, made it to the hallway, leaned against the wall. You did it. Nora hugged her. You looked at him and didn't flinch. I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters. Brooks approached. That went better than I expected. Judge Collins was on our side from the start. Preston's outburst didn't help his case. What happens now? We prepare for trial. Shouldn't be longer than 2 months. Preston's lawyers will try to delay. But with the public pressure and the strength of evidence, the judge will fast-track it. 2 months. Charlotte would be born by then. Mallory would be a mother, facing her abuser, fighting for her daughter's future. I can do this, she said, to herself, to Charlotte, to anyone listening. I know you can. Labor started at 3 in the morning, 1 week after the preliminary hearing, 38 weeks pregnant. Charlotte was ready. Mallory woke to cramping, different from before. Rhythmic, building. She counted, 5 minutes apart. She reached for her phone, called Nora first. It's time. I'm on my way. Call your parents. Next call to Dorothy. Mom, I need you. We're already getting dressed. Rick is getting the car. Mallory stood, walked to the window. The lake reflected moonlight. Peaceful. Perfect. Hi, Charlotte, she whispered to her belly. Today's the day we meet. Are you ready? A strong kick. Yes. Me too, baby girl. Me too. Richard drove calmly. Dorothy timed contractions. Nora sat in back with Mallory. 4 minutes apart now. Almost there. Richard turned into the hospital. Emergency entrance. Dr. Kincaid was waiting. Let's have a baby. Kincaid smiled. They wheeled Mallory to the delivery room. Everything happened fast. Too fast. Not fast enough. Contractions intensified. Mallory gripped out Nora's hand. I can't do this. Yes, you can. It hurts. I know, but Charlotte is almost here. You can do this. Hours blurred together. Pain, pressure, encouragement. You're doing beautifully, Mallory. Almost there. More pushing, more pain. And then a cry. Loud, angry, perfect. It's a girl. Kincaid lifted a tiny, perfect human. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy, strong. They placed Charlotte on Mallory's chest, skin to skin, warm, alive, real. Mallory looked down at her daughter. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, dark hair, eyes scrunched shut, crying her lungs out. Hi, baby. Mallory's voice broke. Hi, Charlotte. I'm your mama. Charlotte's crying stopped. Opened one eye. Looked at Mallory. Recognition. I've got you. Mallory wrapped her arms around her daughter. I've got you. And I'm never letting go. Nora was crying. Dorothy was crying. Even Richard stood at the edge of the room with tears streaming down his face. Welcome, warrior princess, Richard whispered. Dr. Kincaid finished the medical procedures, cleaned Charlotte up, wrapped her in a blanket, placed her back in Mallory's arms. Charlotte Grace Hartwell, Mallory said officially. My daughter, my choice, mine. 3 days in the hospital. Visitors came. Grant brought flowers and a college fund he'd set up anonymously. Nora brought baby clothes and fierce protection. Dorothy and Richard took shifts, made sure Mallory rested. Brooks called. Trial date is set, 6 weeks from now. I'll be ready. You just had a baby. I'll still be ready. Preston tried to send flowers. Security intercepted them, burned them. Nobody told Mallory until later. Evelyn sent a card, simple. Congratulations on Charlotte's birth. I've set up a trust fund in her name. $5 million, anonymous. For her future, it's the least I can do. Mallory stared at the card, didn't know what to feel. She's trying, Dorothy said, in her own way. Is it enough? No, but it's something. Discharge day arrived. Mallory dressed Charlotte in the going-home outfit. Pink, soft, perfect. Carried her daughter out of the hospital. The car seat had been professionally installed. Richard had taken a class, made sure everything was perfect. They drove to the safe house. Charlotte slept the whole way. The nursery was ready. Crib, dresser, rocking chair. Mallory sat down, held Charlotte, rocked gently. Look what I made, she whispered. Not us. Me. I made this miracle. All by myself. Charlotte's tiny hand wrapped around Mallory's finger. Strong grip. Determined. You're going to be amazing, Charlotte Grace. Strong, brave, loved, so loved. The door opened. Nora peeked in. How are you doing? Scared, happy, exhausted, all of it. That's normal. Nora sat on the floor. First weeks are hard, but you're not alone. We're all here. I know. Preston's trial starts in 6 weeks. I know that too. Are you ready? Mallory looked down at Charlotte, her daughter, her miracle, her reason. Yes, I'm ready. He doesn't get to win. Not anymore. 6 weeks later, Mallory walked into the courthouse holding Charlotte. 6 weeks old, alert, beautiful. The best defense attorney money couldn't buy. The media went crazy. Cameras flashing, questions shouting. But Mallory didn't answer, just walked. Dorothy and Richard flanking her, Nora carrying the diaper bag. Brooks met them inside. Jury is seated. Preston's team tried to have Charlotte excluded from the courtroom. Judge denied it, said you have the right to have your infant with you. Good. They entered, the courtroom even more packed than before. Preston already seated, orange jumpsuit again. He'd been denied bail after his outburst. His eyes went to Charlotte. Something flickered across his face. Emotion. Regret. Maybe. Too late, Judge Collins called the court to order. Opening statements, prosecution, you may begin. The prosecutor laid it all out. The video, the recordings, the financial crimes, Amber's testimony, every piece of evidence. Preston's lawyer tried to defend. Called it a misunderstanding, said Preston. Made mistakes but isn't a criminal. The jury's faces said they didn't believe it. Testimony took 3 days. Grant, Amber, hospital staff, character witnesses, and finally Mallory. She took the stand. Charlotte with Nora in the front row, sleeping peacefully. Mrs. Green, sorry, Mrs. Hartwell, can you tell the court about your relationship with Preston Green? Mallory took a breath. I thought I married someone who loved me. Instead, I married someone who saw me as a business transaction. Can you explain? He isolated me, made me doubt myself, called me dramatic whenever I questioned him, laughed when I was in pain. Her voice stayed steady. I ignored every red flag because I wanted to believe in love. You asked why I stayed, why I believed you. It's because I thought love meant giving chances. I was wrong. Love isn't about chances, it's about choices. And you chose her. You chose cruelty every single day. She said it directly to Preston. He looked away. No further questions. Preston's lawyer tried cross-examination, tried to make Mallory seem vindictive, emotional, unstable. But every answer she gave was calm, factual, backed by evidence. The lawyer gave up. The trial lasted 1 week total. Jury deliberation took 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Preston's face went white. His lawyer tried to speak. Judge Collins held up her hand. Mr. Green, you treated your wife like a business transaction and your unborn child like a prop. The law may only sentence you to 9 years, but every person who sees that video will remember you forever. That's the real sentence. Living with what you are. 9 years in federal prison. 7 for embezzlement and fraud. 2 more for assault. Consecutive sentences. Charlotte would be 9 years old when Preston got out, and the court order was clear. No contact until Charlotte turned 18. Preston was removed from the courtroom. Screaming again, blaming everyone. Mallory watched him go, felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no relief, just indifference. He didn't matter anymore. 6 months later, Phoenix Rising Gallery opened in the historic district. Small but elegant, supporting women artists. 20% of sales to domestic violence shelters. Mallory stood in the center of her gallery, Charlotte in a carrier on her chest. 6 months old, grabbing at everything. Curious, fearless. Welcome, everyone. Nora raised a glass of champagne, non-alcoholic for nursing mothers, to Phoenix Rising and to women who save themselves. Applause, laughter, support. Grant was there, engaged to Nora's sister Rachel. He'd completely overhauled Preston's company. Ethical practices, transparent accounting, the Mallory Green Ethics Award for whistleblowers. Their daughter Kincaid came, offered Mallory a position on the hospital ethics board. Mallory accepted. Even the judge from the preliminary hearing attended. "You're an inspiration," she said. Richard and Dorothy stayed close. They'd bought a house 5 minutes away. Sunday dinners became tradition. Dorothy taught Charlotte lullabies. Richard told her stories about ships and oceans. "She has your determination," Richard told Mallory. "She has your stubbornness," Mallory shot back. They laughed. Life wasn't perfect. Mallory still had nightmares. Still heard Preston's laugh sometimes. Still checked locks 3 times. But therapy helped. Support groups helped. Time helped. And Charlotte helped most of all. 1 year after the attack, Charlotte's first birthday party. The beach where Richard had proposed to Dorothy 32 years ago. Sunrise, pink and orange, perfect. Everyone was there. Family, friends, supporters, the community Mallory had rebuilt. Charlotte took her first steps toward Richard across sand, unsteady but determined. "Come on, warrior princess," Richard encouraged. Charlotte fell, got up, tried again, made it to her grandfather's arms. Applause, tears, joy. Mallory watched her daughter, strong, brave, loved. "A year ago, I thought my life was ending." She remembered the marble floor, the blood, the laugh. I was on that floor, bleeding, hearing him laugh. I thought that was my lowest point, my ending. Charlotte squealed with delight, grabbed Richard's face. It wasn't an ending. It was shedding skin I'd outgrown, shedding the woman who made herself small, who apologized for existing, who believed his laugh meant she was dramatic. Nora approached. "There's someone here to see you." Marcus Bennett, architect. Kind eyes, patient demeanor. Nora had introduced them 3 months ago. Casual coffee dates, very slow. No pressure. "Happy birthday, Charlotte." Marcus handed Mallory a wrapped gift. "For her college fund. Small contribution." "Thank you. How are you?" "Good. Really good." They stood together, not touching, not pushing, just comfortable. "Would you like to get coffee next week?" Marcus asked. "No pressure, just coffee." Mallory smiled. "I'd like that." That night, after everyone left, Mallory stood at the water's edge, Charlotte sleeping in her arms, waves rolling in. She thought about Preston, in prison. 7 more years to go, small, insignificant, forgotten by everyone who mattered. She thought about Amber, working retail somewhere, invisible, paying for choices. She thought about Evelyn, alone in her expensive apartment, lost everything money couldn't buy. And she felt nothing, no anger, no hatred, no desire for more revenge. They tried to break me. A wave rolled in, foam touching her toes. Preston, Amber, even Evelyn in her way. They wanted me shattered, manageable, quiet. Charlotte stirred, made a small sound, settled back to sleep. Instead, they freed me. The truth hit her like light, like relief, like the answer she'd been searching for. Because when you survive the worst thing you can imagine, when you hit bottom and realize you can still get up, you stop being afraid. She lifted Charlotte up, held her daughter against the sunrise. This is the real revenge. Not destroying him, not getting even. It's living. Living well, living free, living loud. The sun fully rose, golden, beautiful. New, being the woman he tried to silence, raising the daughter he wanted to use as a prop, building the life he said I couldn't have without him. Charlotte opened her eyes, looked at her mother, smiled. He laughed at my pain. Mallory smiled back. Genuine, free, real. I laugh at my freedom. She walked back up the beach. Toward family, toward her friends, toward the life she'd built from ashes. And that? She kissed Charlotte's forehead. That's everything. The viral video still existed online, but couldn't be erased. Shouldn't be erased. Mallory had given permission for educational use. Domestic violence awareness campaigns, training materials for medical professionals, teaching tools for recognizing abuse patterns. Proceeds went to shelters, therapy programs, legal aid for survivors. The video that was meant to humiliate became a tool for healing. Preston's laugh, immortalized forever, now served as a warning. This is what abuse looks like. This is what cruelty sounds like. This is what control feels like. And this, Mallory and Charlotte thriving, free, alive. This is what survival looks like. Comment sections filled with survivors sharing stories. Thanking Mallory, finding courage. I watched your video. I recognized my own story. I left. Thank you. Your strength gave me strength. And because of you, I believed I could survive. Mallory read them sometimes. Not for validation, for connection, for the knowledge that her pain had purpose. She couldn't change what happened to her, but she could change what it meant. 2 years after the attack, Mallory gave a TED Talk. After the fall, rebuilding from betrayal. The auditorium was packed, thousands watching online. She stood on stage, confident, strong, free. Charlotte sat in the front row with Dorothy, 2 years old, clutching a stuffed rabbit, watching her mama. 2 years ago, I was on a marble floor, bleeding, begging for help while my husband laughed. Today, I'm here, alive, free, raising my daughter, running my business, living my life. She paused, let it sink in. They tried to break me, but here's what they didn't understand. Breaking isn't the same as broken. Breaking is the process. Broken is the choice. I chose not to stay broken. More pause, more truth. The video of that night exists forever. 10 million people saw it, 20 million now, 50 million eventually. And every time someone watches it, they see him laugh. They see me survive. And they make a choice about which person they want to be. She looked directly at the camera. He laughed at my pain. I laugh at my freedom. And that's everything. Standing ovation. Charlotte clapped too, loud, proud. Mallory smiled at her daughter. For you, baby girl, so you always know your mama is strong, so you always know survival is possible, so you always know that love should never make you small. 5 years after the attack, Charlotte started kindergarten, smart, confident, kind. She knew age-appropriate truth about her father, that he'd made very bad choices, that he'd hurt people, that he was paying for those choices. Will I meet him? Charlotte asked once. When you're 18, if you want to, your choice. Do you want me to? Mallory thought about it, really thought. I want you to make whatever choice feels right for you. He's your biological father, but Rick is your grandfather. Marcus is becoming part of our family. You have good men in your life who show you what love should look like. Okay. Simple, easy, no trauma. Charlotte skipped off to play. Mallory watched her daughter, healthy, happy, whole. Preston would get out in 4 more years. Charlotte would be 9. The court order was clear, no contact. But Mallory wasn't afraid anymore. Even if Preston tried to contact them, he held no power. He was just a man, a small, cruel man who'd made terrible choices. Charlotte would grow up knowing her worth, knowing her strength, knowing that no one got to make her feel small. That was Mallory's revenge. That was her victory. Not his destruction, her daughter's freedom. 7 years after the attack, Mallory married Marcus. Small ceremony, beach where it all began, Charlotte as flower girl, 7 years old, beaming. The vows were simple, real. I promise to choose you every day, to make you feel seen, to never make you doubt yourself, To build you up, not tear you down. To laugh with you, not at you. Marcus cried. I promise all the same. And I promise Charlotte that I'll show her what a good man looks like, what healthy love feels like, what respect and kindness mean. They kissed. Charlotte cheered. Richard walked Mallory down the aisle, gave her away, hugged Marcus. You hurt her, and they'll never find your body. Understood, sir. They laughed, but everyone knew Richard meant it. 9 years after the attack, Preston was released from prison. Mallory got the notification. Check the date, check the conditions. No contact, 500 feet minimum, monitored for 5 years. She told Charlotte, now 9 years old enough to understand. How do you feel? Mallory asked. Charlotte shrugged. I don't know him. He's just a man who made bad choices. That's exactly right. And do you think he'll try to contact us? I don't know, but if he does, there are laws protecting us, and we have lots of people who love us and will keep us safe. Okay, Charlotte went back to her homework. Simple, easy, no fear. Preston tried to reach out 2 weeks later, emailed to Mallory's business account. I've changed. I want to meet my daughter. Please give me a chance. Mallory forwarded it to her lawyer, blocked the address, moved on with her life. Preston violated the restraining order 3 months later. Showed up at Charlotte's school, security called police. Preston was arrested, sent back to prison for violating parole. 2 more years added to his sentence. Mallory didn't even attend the hearing, didn't need to, he was irrelevant. 15 years after the attack. Charlotte turned 15, beautiful, smart, strong, wanted to be a lawyer, specialized in domestic violence cases. Because of you, Mom, because I want to help other women like you. Mallory's heart expanded, burst, overflowed. I'm so proud of you. I know, you tell me every day. They laughed. Charlotte knew the full story now, had watched the video, read articles, understood. I'm not him, she said once. People ask if I'm worried about having his genes, about being like him, but I'm not. Genes aren't destiny, choices are. And I choose to be like you. Mallory hugged her daughter. You're better than both of us. You're yourself. 20 years after the attack, Mallory sat on the beach. Same beach, same sunrise, 48 years old. Charlotte was in college, pre-law, dating someone kind, making good choices. Marcus was at home, making breakfast, Sunday ritual. Nora visited weekly. Still single, still happy, godmother extraordinaire. Richard and Dorothy were older, slower, but still present, still loving, still protective. Grant ran the company successfully, ethical, profitable, proof that good business and good morals could coexist. And Preston? Preston was 65, out of prison finally, living in a small apartment, working minimum wage, alone. He tried to rebuild his reputation, write a memoir, give interviews. No one cared. The video existed, his laugh existed, the truth existed, and no amount of time or excuses could change what he'd done. Mallory never thought about him unless someone asked, and even then, just briefly, factually, without emotion. He was part of her story, but not the most important part. The most important part was Charlotte, was survival, was freedom, was love that built up instead of tearing down. The sun rose higher, golden, beautiful, perfect. Mallory's phone buzzed. Text from Charlotte. Love you, Mom. Thanks for showing me what strength looks like. Mallory smiled, typed back. Love you too, baby girl. Thanks for being my reason. She put the phone away, stood, brushed sand from her jeans, walked back toward home, toward Marcus, toward coffee and breakfast and Sunday morning peace. 20 years ago, she'd been on a marble floor, bleeding, begging while her husband laughed. Today, she was here, free, happy, whole. He'd tried to break her. Instead, he'd freed her. And that was everything.